Shalom, shalom. This is Elder Isaac Hill of Restores of Truth Ministries, sharing with you another Scripture Nugget. Today's Scripture Nugget is going to continue on the theme of set apartness that we've already done two parts, part 1 and part 2. Well, today is going to be part 3, in which we would call this the set apart life is simply a marriage contract. The set apart life is simply a marriage contract. And what we're going to do is kind of touch on a few scriptures so that it can help or point you in a direction just to see that the whole context of Torah, the whole context of the Tanakh, and even the renewed covenant or the Brit Kadashah, all of them shows a pattern of a marriage contract. Now, the reason we're doing the set apart life topic is because sometimes as believers, we're so focused on the Torah portions, which is great. Those are the things that we should do. But sometimes we forget that we are a set apart people. And as a set apart people, there are some things that we have to do. There is a way that we should behave. There are some actions that we have to take that shows that we are a set apart people. Now, we're going to begin in Shemot or in Exodus chapter 19. And we're going to kind of touch on about 5 or 6 points to show that we are a set apart people and that the set apart life is simply a marriage contract. Now, many of us already know that there was an agreed contract in Exodus chapter 19. But we're going to look at a few verses to just kind of point out some things, to point out some nuggets. Now, beginning in verse 3, in chapter 19, Shemot, Exodus chapter 19, Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yahuah called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you are to say to the house of Yaakov, and declare to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Mizrites, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself." Now, it's amazing that Yahuah follows protocol. Now, he has a protocol, he has a pattern. And when we find the pattern and follow the protocol, we can grasp and see what Yahuah is really saying. Now, in verse 4, what he's doing, he's actually displaying to Moshe evidence, examples of his husbandry and power and capability to be the husband. Look what he said. I'll read it again. You have seen what I did to the Mizrites and how I bore you on eagle's wings. Now, he's giving an example that I qualify as a husband. I can do the provision. I can provide for you. I can do all of this. It's just like a husband or a young man that wants to come to a young lady and wants to marry them. They have to show that I'm capable of being the husband that you desire, or the husband that you need. Now let's go on. In verse 5, he says, "And now if you diligently obey my voice, and shall guard my command or my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set apart nation. These are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel." Now, what Yahuah is doing here is showing Israel his promise and his intentions to make them a set apart bride. That's number 2. He is showing them his intention of making them a set apart bride. This is going to be special. You're going to be a reign of priests. And I know another version used the word kingdom, but you're going to be a reign of priests, and you're going to be a set apart nation. In other words, you're going to be special. And anytime there is a marriage or a betrothal or an espousal to someone, You must make them feel special. There's something about them that is different from all others. And that's what Yahuah is doing. Now, let's continue to read. Let's pick it up in verse 7. And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahuah commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahuah has spoken, we shall do. So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yahuah. What is happening here? The people now is agreeing to the contract. They are agreeing to the engagement, the proposal. They are agreeing to this. So first of all, to let us know that we are a set apart people is to understand that Yahuah qualifies to be the husband. He gave evidence that he's capable of being the husband, and therefore he gives the short version of a marriage proposal contract. Israel agreed to it. Now, let's go to another point. After accepting the marriage proposal, what happens? You give the bride, the intended bride, an engagement ring or a betrothal ring. Now, what Yahuah gave to us was the Shabbat. Let's look at Shemot in Exodus chapter 31, verse 13. So he says, and you speak to the children of Israel, saying, my Sabbaths you are to guard by all means, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, to know that I am Yahuah, am setting you apart. You see that? That's a sign. Those are the rings that we wear. Now, it uses the plural Sabbath, which means the whole context of the feast as well. And we're going to get to that. But he's given us a sign. He's given us that band, that ring that says we belong to him. Now, as we get a little further, we're going to find out what does it mean to belong to him as a set apart people. As a matter of fact, let's go on further and let's look at Shemot chapter 20. This is a very long text, so you can read that in your spare time, in which he gives a detailed contract. Remember, he gave us the short version in Exodus chapter 19, Shemot chapter 19. Now in Exodus chapter 20, Shemot chapter 20, verses 1 through 17, now he's given us a more detailed informational contract now. What all entails in the marriage contract. What we call the 10 words or the 10 commandments. And so therefore, which actually is 10 words. And then also look at Leviticus chapter 23, the whole 44 verses of that chapter. And what you see is a detailed informational contract. Everything that marriage proposal details is in those two chapters. Okay, so first of all, he tells us he's capable. Secondly, he gives us a verbal contract, a short version. Then he gives us a ring, the Shabbats. Now he's given us a detailed contract. Exodus chapter 20 and Leviticus chapter 23. Now the next thing is there's a requirement placed upon the bride. The contract words must be adhered to. Now that we are married, betrothed, we are espoused, now we have a requirement. We must adhere to the words. How should we adhere to? Emunah, with our belief, with our trust. Look at Yaakov, and some call him James, but it's Yaakov, chapter 2, where we see that somewhere beginning in verse 14 through verse 24, it looks like, where he talks about belief and works, how to match belief and works, or actions, if we could say that. So we can say we have belief, we can say we have Emunah, but if we do not show that, then how can one tell? It's kind of like a bride, an expectant bride, someone that is betrothed, someone that is engaged. If you say that you are, then you must carry yourself as if you are. You see, if a person is acting as if they're not engaged, then that shows to the world, oh, you're not spoken for. You're not set apart because your behavior doesn't match up with what you're saying. Now, let's go on a little further. Now what happens is that Yahuah gives us his Ruach. Now remember, he wants us to respond with Emunah, our belief and our trust. Now he's saying, I'm going to help you to walk in Emunah, in belief and trust and actions, by giving you my Ruach. Now, by giving us his Ruach, it says two things. Now, let's look at the book of Yahuah, John chapter 14. And what you see here is that beginning at verse 3, this is Yahushua speaking. And he says, whatever you ask in my name, that shall I do, in order that the Father might be esteemed in the Son. If you ask whatever in my name, I shall do it. Now, I'm reading from the scriptures, the ISR. He says now in verse 15, if you love me, you shall guard my commands. And I shall ask the Father, and he shall give you another helper to stay with you forever. And in verse 17, he says something very, very, very powerful. He says, the Spirit of the truth, whom the world is unable to receive, because it does not see him or know him, but you know him, for he stays with you and shall be in you. Now, notice what he says. He says, the world is unable to receive. As a bride, an attendant bride, there is something that you have that the world or no other woman or no other person should have. It's as if you have been given a license to do something and to be something that no one else has. Now that's special. Now, he goes on. He says now in verse 18, I shall not leave you orphans. I'm coming to you yet a little while, and the world no longer sees me, but you shall see me, because I live, and you shall live. In that day you shall know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. He who possesses my commands and guards them, it is he who loves me. That's an indicator. If I possess his word, if I possess his commands, and not only possess them, but I guard them. I guard them. You see, as a bride, when I have been given the contract, I possess that contract, but I also guard that contract. So when I'm out and about doing my daily routine, I'm guarding the contract. In other words, I'm living up to the contract. When others see me, they see a person that's living up to the contract. I'm living up to the contract. Now, he says, and he who loves me shall be loved by my Father, and I shall love him and manifest myself to him. Now, what we see here is two main points in that text that I just read. Yahuah chapter 14, verse 13, all the way down to verse 21, possibly verse 22. Now, look at this. The two things within this text is, number one, he gives me the authority, the power to live up to the agreed contract. Okay? Number two, it gives me the authority and the right to use his name. Now understand something. As someone that has been spoken for, and a person who has been spoken for that lives up to the agreement, you now have the authority and the right and the power to operate in your husband's name. It's as if your husband is with you when you live and operate in his name. So, when he has given us his Ruach, he's given us the sign, he's given us his words, he's given us the contract, and I protect that contract by living up to it, I can operate as if the husband is already here. So therefore, when I say something in his name, he's given me the authority, the power, the right to use his name, and the entities has to obey and respond as if my husband himself has spoken. So when we look at the set apart life, we look at it as if it's a marriage, and it is, contract. Now, when you read the Torah, the Tanakh, the Brit Kadasha, all throughout those texts, you're going to see a pattern of a set apart people, a set apart life, and how to guard and how to walk in his authority. Shalom, shalom. See you next time on Scripture Nuggets.